Hi, my name is Hazim Gaber, and today we're going to be learning about CompTIA Security Plus SY0-701 Section 1.1, which is controls. So, Objective 1.1 is compare and contrast various types of security controls. So, on the left here, we have uh, what we call technical. We have our categories. So we've got technical controls, managerial controls, operational controls, and physical controls. And on the right here, we've got control types. So they can be preventative, deterrent, detective, corrective, compensating, or directive. And a control will fit into one category, and it can also be a type. So you can have a control that's technical and preventative, for example, or you could have a control that's technical and detective, etc., etc. So we can have a number of different control types. So I digress. What's a technical control? Uh, what's a control? First of all, a control is a it's a method or a device or a policy that prevents unwanted behavior. So this is a security course. So you can think of we're trying to prevent someone from either entering our building or stealing our data or damaging our systems. We're going to learn that there's all kinds of other threats, for example, that have nothing to do with people. So we can also have a flood. We can have a server room overheat. We can have a fire. There's got to be controls to protect the organization from those things. There's also human error. There's also risks. So controls work in layers. We don't necessarily just put one control in and hope for the best. We put layers of security and they work together. So even if one of them fails, then we still have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 other layers to protect us. We've also got what we call. We've also got. So let's actually dive into technical controls. So a technical control is something logical. So it can be hardware or it can be software, but it's essentially it doesn't physically prevent someone from doing something. So it can be a firewall, an intrusion prevention system, an intrusion detection system, encryption, a backup of our data, um, that kind of thing. And the software prevents someone from doing a behavior that we don't want them to do. So it prevents them from gaining access to our network. It prevents them from reading our data while in transit. It prevents people, so we can have access control lists, so we can prevent people from accessing files that they don't have permission to access. Technical controls, it can be very complicated. They can have lots of different rules and lots of different scenarios, and we're going to look in greater detail later in this course as to what how to configure technical controls for best practices. The second type of control is a managerial control. We used to call these administrative controls, but a managerial control is basically just a policy. So the organization says, don't go to bad websites, or don't look at this data, or don't enter this room. They put a sign on the door, don't enter this room. And it doesn't actually physically or logically prevent you from doing the behavior. It just punishes you if you do it. So if you violate the policy, you could be fined, you could lose your job, that kind of thing. The managerial controls work well with physical or logical controls. So the managerial control is the first layer, and the second layer is, so the first layer will be a managerial control usually, and the second layer will be either a physical or a logical control. And so if you violate, so if the physical control fails, there's still a deterrent through the managerial control. But the managerial controls don't work well to punish people who are outside the organization. That's why we need a physical control, because somebody might say, well, I'm gonna pick this lock, or I'm gonna hack this server, and I don't work here, so they can't fire me because I don't work here. So we need multiple layers here. We've also got operational controls. So an operational control is a control that's put in place by management after speaking with the pause. So operational controls are, they're put in place by management, and they're not like business strategies. They're more like processes. So the CEO, for example, says, I want to prevent data loss. Then this trickles down to middle management. Middle management says, well, how do we prevent data loss? So we can put in a policy to back up data. We can put a policy to use encryption. Data leak prevention, so DLP, appliance. And then these are all mid-level policies. So it's a trickle-down effect. And then we also have what we call physical controls. So physical controls are physical, obviously. Can be like access control systems, locks, fences, lights, security cameras, bollards, a security guard. And they're not just to keep people out, they're also to protect us from the environment. So we can have HVAC, we can have fire alarms, thermostats, smoke detectors, because a fire could be just as harmful to our data as a hacker. So we need to be able to protect against the environment. So those are all of the control types, and now we'll look at the categories. The first category is a preventative control. So a preventative control stops you from doing something that you shouldn't. So we can look at physical. So the preventative control can be physical. So it can be like a door lock, an access control system, or it can be logical. So it could be like a firewall. It could be like encryption, intrusion prevention system, an access control list to keep you out of files that you're not supposed to have access to. But in summary, it prevents you from doing what you're not supposed to be doing. But don't think of a control as like foolproof, because someone can pick a lock. They can a human can keep the door open accidentally. They can forget to lock the door. They can misconfigure the control. Sometimes an access control system can be both physical and logical, because it's got the key card, for example, and it's got the software that manages the system and decides who has access and when. So the software can be misconfigured and the physical part can fail or can be left unlocked. We also have what we call a deterrent control. So a deterrent control doesn't stop you, but it makes it difficult for you to do something. So deterrent control could be a fence, or it could be a security camera. If you see a security camera on a building, you might think twice about breaking in, because there's somebody might catch you. The fence, you can climb a fence, but it's less likely. The other type of deterrent control can be administrative. So we could say, if you violate our control, we can fine you. So $1,000 fine, for example. That can be an administrative control. If you violate the rule, you'll pay some money, and it might not be profitable for you to do it. Or we'll fire you. You're fired if you do something you're not supposed to be doing. We also have detective controls. Detective controls don't prevent stuff, but they do tell us when something is happening so we can respond. And a security camera or an alarm system are detective controls, but they can also be deterrent controls, because if you know that there's an alarm or camera, you're less likely to break in. But at the same time, if you do break in, we're going to catch you. And these systems work in layers with preventative controls. So preventative physical controls. So like a door lock. And deterrent controls, like a fence. So if I have a building and I put a fence around it, that's my first layer. Nobody's gonna get through. If you climb the fence, then we've got cameras watching you, and we've got alarm sensors watching you, and then so you'll get caught. And then by the time the security guard shows up to catch you, we also have a door lock. So then our building, our most secure room, we've got a lock. So if you manage to get in, you'll be picking the lock. By then, the security guard will come here and catch you. So we've got, in this case, 3 layers of controls, and they're different types of controls. If we just had the fence and the lock and no camera or alarm, then our security guard wouldn't find out that you're breaking into the room, and you'd probably, if you came in at night, climb the fence, nobody would see you. You break in, you do what you wanted. This might slow you down, but if the data or the valuables are big enough, you might not care. You might say, "Hey, this is worth my while. I'm gonna do that." So that's why we need to have detective controls. The other type of control is called a corrective control. So corrective control resolves the problem after we detect it. So one of the types of corrective controls, for example, could be a fire suppression. So if we detect a fire, the suppression system puts it out. If we have um, a door unlocked, the system locks the door automatically. If we've got a virus on our computer, there's a antivirus program removes the virus or reboots the computer. Corrective controls are the last layer of defense because we've already had our violation. So notice a corrective control has to have a detective control, because if we don't detect the problem, then we won't be able to correct it. So we have to detect the problem first and then correct it. So there's some configuration required so to activate the corrective control upon detection. When we don't have a directive control, we can use when we don't have a proper control, we use what we call a compensating control. So a compensating control doesn't solve the problem properly. It's just a stopgap method. So it could be something like we have a door that's unlocked and we can't. So for example, I was working in a store and the shutter failed at the front of the door. So the store had to stay. The store couldn't close or set the alarm for like 6 weeks until they fixed the shutter. So they had to put a security guard at the store every night from like 9 p.m. when the staff came home until like 6 a.m. when the staff showed up to work. So that's a stopgap method. It's not the proper way of doing something, because the security guard could fall asleep, or they might let somebody in who shouldn't be in there, or they might not realize that, or they might take a bathroom break. So it's not a proper control. Sometimes the business has to have a compensating control because the correct control is too expensive, and so it may not be preventing what we need it to prevent. So we might have, let's say, a server room, and the fire suppression system is going to cost us $60,000. So we might not want to put a fire suppression system in. We might just say, let's put a fire extinguisher at the door and a smoke detector. And if somebody hears a smoke detector, they can run and put out the fire. But that's not, that might work for a small fire, but the fire already did the damage, and we don't know if someone's going to respond in time, or if the fire happens at night when there's nobody there, it's not going to work very well. So we don't want to use a stopgap method if we can avoid it. And the last type of control is what's called a directive control. So directive controls are generally administrative controls. And what directive controls do is they remove the risk of something happening before it happens. So a directive control could be an order from the management. So management says we don't want to have any data loss. Or we don't want anybody to read our sensitive data. So that's a directive control. Let's get rid of that risk. And that translates into physical and logical controls like encryption. So, or we might have a vault in our building full of money. We don't want the money to get stolen. So management says, let's take the money and put it all in the bank. So now there's no more risk of our money getting stolen. It's all in the bank now. It's not in the vault in our building. Or, there's no risk of it getting stolen. There's no risk of a fire causing it to burn, etc., etc., etc. So directive controls usually work well with all the other controls. If you have any questions, please post a comment and we will answer them in the next video. Thank you.